Welcome to the Stash Cast, where innovation meets real estate. Let's dive in.
John, thank you so much for coming to join us today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me, Stash.
For everybody at home, this is John Wijtenburg. We had a conversation beforehand, but for the folks at home that haven't had the pleasure of speaking with you yet, why don't you give us an idea of who you are and what you do?
Absolutely. So I am a hotel asset manager and consultant business coach. I got into the real estate business as an economist in Fannie Mae during the great financial crisis and moved my way into commercial real estate in 2011. Joined a regional hotel development company in 2012 and focused primarily on acquisitions, then moved into asset management, raising capital, and business strategy generally. When the whole world collapsed in 2020, I joined a buddy to build a portfolio of extended stay economy scale hotels. And so we did that for about 4 years, built it to 8 properties. I got out of that at the beginning of 2024. Since then, just been focused back on institutional grade luxury hotels, primarily asset management. But over time, I've started to notice challenges regardless of the size of the portfolio or quality of the portfolio. And so I decided to also pivot a little bit into real estate business consulting, more on the management consulting side of things.
What was it like? I want to go back to the beginning a little bit before we go into what you're up to. What was it like being an economist you said Fannie Mae?
At Fannie Mae, it was really awesome. It was a time when big data wasn't really big data yet. There wasn't the tool set that you have now. A lot of it was developed at the end of the 2010s with the open source tools like Hadoop and some of these others. We were still using SAS, which was the biggest big data platform available. But the tools that we were building were shaping the way that we look at modifications, home loan modifications. Our team in the credit loss division was focused on building the model that became the decision engine for all the HEMP modifications from 2009 until around 2015 when the whole program kind of closed up. But it was exciting. We had access to a multi-trillion-dollar book of business, and we could figure out what moves the needle in terms of home loans and getting things approved and what makes sense and all those good things.
Fascinating.
And it was at a time right before the GSEs took a big step into multifamily. And so at that time, we were talking about like, how do you like underwrite a multifamily deal in the same way that we underwrite single family? Because single family is kind of cookie cutter, rinse and repeat. Multifamily is a little more challenging. There's some nuances to each deal. Each property has distress or not distress in different ways. You just can't look at it the same way that you can look at a single family deal.
On the face of it, it's, here's the rents, here's the expenses, and here's what taxes are going to do. But each deal definitely has its own nuance to it for sure. So why'd you decide to go into hotels then?
So it wasn't so much that I wanted to be in hotels. I just wanted to move out of residential and into commercial real estate. In 2010, 11, when I made this decision to move back to Florida and out of single family, I called everybody and their mother about getting into commercial real estate. I got a lot of really good advice, but all the developers basically like, hey, look, there's nothing happening. It's 2011. There's no business for someone of your experience. And so I became a broker. I learned the ropes at Marcus and Millichap. And to me, while it was challenging, it was probably one of the most amazing educations I've had, just in terms of how to build a list, how to approach owners, all of those different things. And that's what led me to the developer. They came to me, they recruited me off of LinkedIn, and they were building a brand, a hotel brand, primarily in Florida, but had big hopes all over the country. And so they sent me around dogging deals in top 25 markets around the US. And it was a terrific experience. We started to get some traction and hired some analysts and other acquisitions folks. And that put me in a position to move up into asset management and raising capital, which was when things really started to get interesting for me.
So Were you in the hotel practice, or you were just doing investment sales at M&M, which they brag that they've trained about half the industry, which is probably true.
Right. Yeah, I was not in the hotels space, but I was in multifamily, which is their bread and butter, especially here in South Florida. And so I went around, I met just about everybody. It's funny, my first listing was actually a short-term rental. It was a yachting crew rental, and it was exposed me to the hotel space without knowing it.
Yeah. Huh. I'm just curious about so you were just flying all over the country looking at, were they existing assets that you were looking to purchase and rebrand, or dirt for new sites?
We did look at some new construction opportunities, but it really wasn't our wheelhouse. We were at this interesting inflection point in the market where there were two directions that the hotel industry was going. One was lifestyle and the other was extended stay. It was already built out in that select service space with courtyards and that sort of thing. But the lifestyle world was really starting to pick up. You only had a handful of big players there, like Commune Hotels, Wallaby, Kimpton, etc. Graduate Hotel was just coming up. And so we were jumping onto that wave. And in all reality, there wasn't a lot of really interesting development, new construction opportunities, but there were a lot of really tired hotels that could use some love. And the biggest challenge we had was dealing with liquidated damages because we had to terminate the brand. That comes at a cost, and we have to justify that in a way that we either take lower fees or we structure the capital better, or we do a more nuanced renovation than what you would typically see in a branded property improvement plan.
That's amazing. That sounds so cool.
Yeah, it was
A lot of fun. So I'm sorry, go ahead.
The big challenge, though, was that you're competing with people who are happy to have the brands, right?
Yeah.
And so at that extent, if you're not value engineering the renovation and the rebranding, it's very difficult to compete in the transaction market.
I guess that is what has helped give you, I guess that's what gave you the knowledge to then be able to branch out on your own and then to then move forward into your current position or endeavor now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Essentially helping newer or scaling real estate companies, you might say, professionalize their operation. Is that a good way to think about it?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I noticed over my years in the business, both working in companies, working for companies, consulting with real estate companies, is that a lot of times these founders reach a level where, they hit a ceiling. No matter how much they work, it feels like they can't grow anymore. It's really more like the number of properties that they can handle, the number of projects that they can handle. And that number, it varies by the operational intensity, but it's somewhere between 5 and 8 assets. And the challenge is really that they put so much of their identity into the business, and so much of the success of the business is dependent on their skill, their knowledge, their ability, their relationships, their ability to put deals together, whatever it is, whatever their secret sauce is. The challenge is evolving from being the business and into creating the systems, creating the tools, the culture, et cetera, that allows them to step back and let decisions happen kind of more automatically.
Mhm.
And that's what unlocks the scale, and that's what professionalizes the business. But it's really a mindset shift to be able to say, okay, 80% done by someone else is better than me doing everything myself.
I feel very seen right now, like you're talking directly to me about everything that I've got going on. So I guess, how do you help them shift the mindset and say it's okay to have something done 80% as well by a staff member or a team member versus it being just right, just perfect because it's done the way that I wanted it?
Yeah, a huge part of it is that acceptance and that identity shift. It's separating yourself from the business and looking at the business as an entity on its own. So that's the first step. You have to be ready to make that separation and then start putting the pieces into place to allow for the growth. From there, the thing that's so critical, there's two pieces that are so important to make this work, especially as you're transitioning out of being the identity and being the business. The first piece is this vision first strategy, right? So you have to have a very clear vision about where you want the business to go, but also where you see the opportunity in your investment thesis, right? Because there's layers to this. You have your vision at the bottom, you have the operations and the business in the middle, and then you have the investments at the top. And so basically your vision operates the operation, the business, your business operates the portfolio. And so it's very essential to have that vision super clear, because that influences your culture, that influences the way you execute all of those different things. But beyond that, once you have that clear and you have the cultural elements and artifacts in place, then you start putting in the execution engine that makes it all work. And the execution engine is what gives you comfort and confidence that what you're handing off is being taken care of at the best ability, right? And that's all about setting up annual, it's really 10, 3, 1 year goals. From there, you break it into quarterly WIGs, to take a term from 4 disciplines of execution, this wildly important goal. And then in that 12 to 13 week execution cycle, you work within 2-week sprints so that you're developing the infrastructure over time that will allow the business to grow and allow all of those artifacts to turn into SOPs and turn into culture and all the code, the automation that allows these things to run without you being 100% on every single call, every decision, all the different things.
Right. You're able to empower your team to make some of those decisions on your behalf based on the vision that you put forward.
And so a great example of this that I always love to point to retail, because it's like sports. When you can see it and touch it and feel it, it makes a lot more sense. So one of the things that I like to point to is Publix supermarkets. So phenomenal story. They've been growing tremendously, but a big part of where they start is on their tagline. They say, Publix, where shopping is a pleasure. That tagline holds so much for the associate, for the customer, for whoever, to say, okay, is this going to be a pleasurable experience? If not, it doesn't fit with the decision we're going to make.
I love that. That makes a lot of sense. And I think it holds true for any company. What's your tagline, and then what's your culture? Do they align? I had a podcast yesterday, it'll come out in a couple of weeks, with Andrew Ackerman, who's a venture capitalist. He's focused mostly in the construction and prop tech space. And it's funny, he just wrote a book in novel form about the startup founder's journey from initial idea on through the end. It reminds me a lot of what you're talking about. There are similarities. And then on that call, I was like, this sounds like the E-Myth. Have you read the E-Myth? Which is not a bad thing, I don't think, because in that they're talking about the franchise model. And that's what you're talking about, is create systems so that you know that it's going to be done generally each time.
Yeah. It's built to sell the founder's dilemma. The challenge that I saw was that, and looking at those different resources like entrepreneurial operating system, 4 disciplines of execution, management by objectives, they each have pieces that I loved, but none of them really fit for the real estate business, because we're building an investment platform, and then we're also running operations in a real estate environment. And where I came from in the hotel world, I always say that hotels are more an operating business than real estate business, whereas a lot of the other big 4 CRE is more real estate with an operating component.
I think in any real estate investment business, you have 2 customers, really. You have the end user of whatever the property is, and then you also have your investors. And even if you are your own investor, like, you still have to make sure
deliver.
Those 2 things are serving each other. Are you just focused in the hotel sector, or is it you work across the spectrum of food types, food
So,
groups?
yeah, on the asset management side, it's strictly hotels. On the consulting side, the business and management consulting side, that's open to all food groups.
Yeah, you're right. A hotel, you have to be there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So I can see why one person can only successfully handle one, or I think in our pre-call, we talked about 3 to 5 is where you see people tend to stall out, but I don't even know how you do 3 to 5. I guess you have a site staff always, but
Yeah, I mean, there's tiers to it. It's just like any private equity, corporate private equity kind of operation. You choose good management, and then you empower them with everything they need, the tools to manage effectively. You empower yourself with the reporting cadence and the perspective on what success means. What does done look like? By setting that objective up front, you end up managing by exception rather than managing by looking at everything all at once. So you can scale a little bit more. When things fall out of bounds, there's a problem that you need to address. But if everything's moving in the right direction, it's all in that allowed boundary, it's something that you can just let operate.
The Stash Cast is brought to you by Needle. What if you could use data and analytics to predict real estate transactions? With Needle, you can. Check it out at needle.us to learn more.
so what are some of the metrics that you help your clients focus on that in the asset management space, and then alignment between investor, operator, and sponsor?
It is, but it's also different depending on the asset and the situation. I think the biggest thing is removing yourself from the underwriting, right? Because what we tend to do is we set this plan up and strategy right at the beginning of investment, and we keep that as gospel, right? This is what we're doing. We'll continue operating this way. And what happens, especially in the hotel world where it's very much an operating business, what happens is you get into this cadence of tearing off the cover sheet and putting a new cover sheet on your operating plan for the next year. And so you end up with very similar sales and marketing approach, very similar budgets, et cetera. And so what I really push hard is developing new strategy every year. And one of the biggest tools that I use for that is what I call the solution design engine. But basically, it's a double diamond design approach where you identify a problem or challenge, you expand the aperture so that you can collect as much information as you can from everybody in the business, particularly in the field, right? So you want to gather information from the sales and marketing team, the maintenance team, housekeeping, finance, et cetera. Everybody needs to get involved and pitch in on that particular topic. Then it allows you to narrow down to find the root cause of the problem, root cause of the challenge. And that could be anything from the property condition to the way that we're approaching the market, or the positioning in digital advertising spend, or whatever it is. And then once you have a good idea about that root cause, then you open the aperture again. This is the second diamond opening up, and you collect your entire solution set. And so you're going to fill that up with whether it's tools, people, processes, whatever it is that's going to be in that solution set, and then start to narrow it down to the actual solution that is going to move the needle. And so by doing this, you're building engagement along the way, which is a tremendous part of culture and getting alignment within the team, because it's not just people being told what to do. They've bought in over time. But also you're avoiding one of the biggest challenges that I see in business generally, but especially in the real estate business, which is you find people with a great solution looking for problems. They go to a conference, they watch something on YouTube or read a book or whatever, and they say, okay, this is it. This is going to be the problem. They run around bothering everybody, trying to fit this solution into some problem that might exist. And then what ends up happening is they run an artificial process and then install something that doesn't get any buy-in. And then they wonder why it doesn't work. 6 months later and they blame either the team or whatever it is and create contempt within the environment.
Which I think is a common management mistake in any industry where it's, hey, here's what we're going to do. But instead, wait, I want to make sure I understand what you just said. So basically, you take in all of the feedback about everything that could be done better, perhaps.
Right.
And then you distill those things down. And then you say, okay, here are the top things that we think we could be doing better. And then you kind of engineer solutions around those things, which will then fix everything else. Is that right?
Correct. And the objective is really to, as an example, we had a big challenge with just revenue generally. Come 2023, 23 was challenging because a lot of travelers were going to nicer hotels or they were traveling overseas or whatever it was. And then inflation was starting to eat the lower income wallet in our business. And so we had a challenge attracting the right people. And it didn't help that we just didn't manage our guest reviews very well. One of the things that I came up with was, look, it's not necessarily a revenue problem that we need to fix. It's more of a reputation problem. And to that extent, rather than focusing on number of calls or amount of ads that we put out or whatever, we want to focus on lifting our guest review scores. Because if we say this is the gold standard that we want to get to, move from 7 stars to 9 or 8, whatever that number is, then we'll be able to move the needle. And what that does is it engages the entire downstream, because everybody on the team has an ability to impact that guest review score, whether it's a maintenance person, a housekeeper, front desk person, manager, sales and marketing. Everybody has a way to impact that guest review score, and that will move the needle for revenue.
Especially in a hotel or in the hotel business, because there are so many moving parts and there are a lot of options too. I imagine that when you go on vacation, you're a little bit cursed because you're looking at all the different elements. Oh, they could do this better, or, oh, they did that really well.
Yeah. My family is routinely annoyed by it.
I'm sure. My dad was a contractor growing up, and his eye, whenever he was walking a property or a house or something, he would always like look at things and be like, oh, that's wrong. See how they did that? So I imagine it's the same sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you think that most investors who are looking at getting into the hotel business, maybe in a passive way, are aware of all the complexity that they're getting into? Or are they just saying, hey, let me be an LP and where's my money? Where are my returns?
It's definitely a more advanced strategy. I think a lot of it has to do with exposure. Hotels comprise 2% of all real estate square footage in the country. And so by nature, you're going to see a lot fewer deals. Whereas I think you can throw a stone on social media and find 1,000 multifamily syndicators.
Yeah.
And so you just don't see it as much. But that said, it's a lot easier to spot good operators than it is in multifamily or industrial or office or some of the big 4 CRE, because it's just such a stark difference between a good operator and a bad operator, because it operates at a much faster cycle time. So you can see very quickly that someone's not hitting their numbers a lot faster than you can with a 1 year, 5 year, 10-year lease cycle. So
it can be a double-edged sword, I guess. Like it can fall very quickly. And I imagine it's tough to climb that hill, as in any business, but also you can hopefully turn it around pretty quickly too.
it's absolutely the first to recover, but it's also that instability is the first to hit when a recession comes along. A great example is last summer was a funky time in the hotel world. The group business came back. So big groups really came back strong last summer. Business travel came back strong last summer, which is rare in an election year like that. But domestic leisure travel fell through the floor. A lot of that was we had a strong dollar, people were traveling internationally, but then a lot of it was also booking windows were tightening, lower income travelers weren't traveling as much as they were. You started to see it actually in the theme park visitation started to drop. And so it on the whole, if you look at the hotel space generally last summer, it looked strong, it looked healthy. But if you dig down into the numbers and look at the business mix, it was not as healthy as you would want because now leisure travel is out, business is unstable because there's so much uncertainty coming into the market. And so we're looking around and saying, okay, is this a potential recession coming up, or is there just room for growth here because business will continue to improve, business travel will continue to improve, conferences will continue to grow, and the leisure market will thrive with a softer dollar.
Interesting. I'm just pondering all the different data points that you and everybody in the hotel business are contemplating, which is much more than I think any of the other verticals are looking at. In the apartment business, we're looking at, okay, area median income, what your comps are doing, what they're getting for rents, and employment base. But it seems like you in the hospitality space have to be much more tuned in. You mentioned a stronger dollar, which leads to more overseas travel for those people that would, if they have their choice to say Florida or California or wherever the destination is, if you have a strong dollar, they're going to go overseas potentially. Right. It's just fascinating to me.
But there's a lot that ties them together. And the big piece that ties them together is this idea of community. And this applies across all real estate assets. So in the hotel space, it's very easy to see community evolve day to day. When you have a big corporate group in-house, then the community is very buttoned up and tidy. And then you go into the weekend and it's more families. So you see the community evolve and change. But you have to price appropriately for that because you don't want to have the big corporate group in there and then you have people wheeling their coolers through the lobby. I think it's the same though with retail.
At the same time, at least, two groups.
But I think it's very similar. If you look at tenanting a retail shopping center, it's very important to get the right tenants in the right spot, right? You're thinking about walking patterns, you're thinking about who's a complementary use. Same with multifamily, the wrong tenant can really create the wrong environment and can turn off other tenants. Right. I think it's all tied together. It's just the frequency is a little bit different.
I'm looking at my notes here. And so you've got 4 different levers. You've got capital, code, content, and collaboration. How do those things play together? And is there one that is more powerful than the rest?
Yeah, they play very well together. And I wish I could take credit for that, but that's Naval Ravikant, legendary investor in Silicon Valley, came up with the 4 C's there. We in the real estate world focus intensely on capital. We consider that to be the greatest lever. I think when you start to get down to the operational level, you think about collaboration, the people that are in your business. And then we start to put together some simple SOPs and decision matrices and things like that. And that's your code, right? I think the thing that a lot of people discount is content. And we have this ability now to be a media empire, right? Each person as an individual can be a media empire.
Welcome to the Stashcast.
Right. And so that has just tremendous implications for all the other elements or the other forms of leverage, because the content to be able to deliver your vision through culture and develop that as a code of conduct or a code of the way that we operate is so important. The content brings people in and gets them curious about what you're doing and how they can participate with you and gets them excited about the type of operation that you're running.
You've got a great mindset and framework for operation. What inspired you to say, because I presume you still are active in the space as maybe an operator or sponsor yourself, but what inspired you to say, let's start a consulting practice?
I've struggled a lot in business just because business is hard.
It
You
is
know,
hard.
and real estate investing is hard. Just investing generally is hard. And I see a lot of people coming up and doing all the right things to get into the business. They join the communities, the masterminds, the coaching, but then they get stuck. And I noticed it happen. The thing that stood out to me is that I noticed it happen at a really high level with highly skilled, pedigreed people. And these are people who have portfolios are billions of dollars, and you still have the key executives in the middle of every major decision. And it's not to say that they shouldn't be in the middle of major decisions, but a lot of those decisions were well beneath their pay grade. And I see it happen everywhere. And it really is tied to that identity piece. So they get so tied up in this has to be successful. This has to be to the degree that I can manage. And so you can create this burnout that I experienced, and I've seen lots of friends experience as well. So to me, this is more of a passion project. The real estate market is uncertain right now, and there's economic pieces to this as well. That's just a nice place to spend some time while we wait for the market to turn around and deals to come back. But I think the bigger portion is that I've seen all these terrific coaches get people into the business on how to find a deal, raise capital for the deal, find operating partners, whether that's construction or property management. But they stop once you've had 5 assets, 8 assets, whatever it is, because that's beyond the scope of their coaching. And then these investors are left looking around at generic frameworks like entrepreneurial operating system or 40X or scaling up. And a lot of these were built for SaaS companies, media agencies, different, more predictable life cycle businesses with you have your 90-day sales cycle and you have these customers, et cetera. But this real estate doesn't work like that. And so I decided to consolidate all of the things that I learned from those frameworks, as well as my experience, and deliver something that I know can move the needle for people in the business.
An off-topic question, but maybe not really in today's world. How do you use and implement like AI or ChatGPT, for instance, in your practice and in your assignments?
So I use it just like a lot of other people. A lot of it is content generation. One thing that I've been doing a lot with it lately is developing code so that I have some lightweight tools that I can use in my Chrome browser or in Excel or wherever. I get these code snippets and I can put them in place and then have these tools very quick to use. So that's an area that I've been using a lot lately. The area that I'm really excited for, and I haven't seen it come out yet, I'm talking to a few people about how they could see this work, but is connecting the human element with the built environment. And what I mean by that is basically taking all the sensors that we have in the built environment and connecting it to the human experience. So if I see that guests from a particular room are routinely saying that the air conditioning was wrong or the humidity was off or whatever the problem is, then the system will automatically make that connection and manage the maintenance requests. Whereas right now it's such a manual process and it's so many disconnected silos. The reputation manager, the social media person isn't talking to the maintenance people the way they should.
Yeah. There are a lot of solutions out there that are trying to tap into the Internet of Things and then bring that into the asset management practice of things. But it's really tough to do. It seems simple in principle, but it's very difficult.
Doubt there's some scope creep there too, though. I think a lot of it is simple and it's just, they just think they can't release a simple product. Because the product will have a big impact, but they need to add a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. And then it's just like impossible to ship.
Yeah, exactly. And that happens when you build something that you think is going to be really great instead of getting product market fit and user feedback. That's right.
Yes. Yeah.
So how have you seen that make an impact in some of the businesses that you've worked with?
So I think the automation piece and the integration has the biggest impact. And that's not just automation integration as we think of it from like a technical perspective of connecting your property management system to your financial reporting system. It's also identifying all the different interfaces along the way, collecting data from management, from frontline teams, from all these different places so you can paint a more cohesive picture about what's going on in the business. There are some technical elements to that as well. How do you get the feedback and how do you process it? But then the automation piece is using some AI and intelligence, but also bringing on team members from overseas, bringing on contract team members who may have a different perspective, who can do bits and pieces instead of the whole thing. I think one of the most impactful areas is being able to build a team for a fraction of the cost overseas that you would here in the US. But we built a team of 30 people overseas that handled everything from HR, recruiting, compliance, legal, evictions. It was remarkable.
So how did you do that? Because I've got a VA and he's going to do some editing on this and he handles the posting and all that. But it was like, I get pitch slapped every day with, hey, we can do virtual assistant work for you, for instance. I got that a lot. And so I went back and I searched in my LinkedIn virtual assistant or VA or something like that. And I came up with essentially an RFP document and I ran it just like I ran a deal. I said, here's the requirements I'm looking for. Here's your date to respond. And then I got maybe 10 applicants that way. And I ended up with Ralph. But it was not an easy process. And maybe it's just because my first time doing it, but I'm curious how you went about doing that.
Yeah. So I started out through working through an agency, and I think it was, gosh, I forgot. I think it was Support Shepherd, or one of the big guys that post a lot on Twitter X. The thing I didn't like about it was that you only receive who they think may be qualified. And so you end up with 3 candidates. And so what I started to feel was like, okay, I'm not getting the cream of the crop, or they're just not understanding what we need. And so I ended up running my own process and just ran it like I would hiring someone domestically. The challenge is if you're using Indeed or LinkedIn or whatever source channel that you're using, there are important pieces that you should include in your job posting and in the recruitment process, and also understanding the way that the culture, right? So you have to build a culture that works for remote work. And so basically I go out, run a process. The latest process I did, we got 130 applicants, brought 30 people to the second round, 20 people to the next round. We sent a questionnaire, which added some friction to the process, which required a personality test and a video introduction, as well as a few other questions. That narrowed it down to 8 people. We brought 3 through to the next round and then 1 higher. And so using that funnel allows us to really hone in on the right person for the job.
You just said, and I love the description of the process that you just did. Next time I hire somebody, I'm going to go back and listen to this episode. But you mentioned creating a culture that is conducive to working virtually. How did you do that? Or what does that mean?
A big part of it is building engagement. And it's so hard to do that when you're not sitting in the same office, right? When you can't just go over to the person, tap them on the shoulder. And there's this push and pull where you want to be available and then you also want time for deep work. And so the way that I handle this is by using a meeting cadence where we have bi-weekly meetings to set sprint standards and expectations, and then daily huddles to calibrate where we are in the sprint. We meet daily to clear any roadblocks, talk about what the success is, where we're going for the next day. And then at the end of the sprint, rather, we look back and we say, okay, what worked, what didn't.
And is that how many people on a team are you?
So the max I had was 8 people on a team. And it's ideally suited for, call it 5 to 8.
So you had a daily huddle that was what, like 15 minutes or something
Yeah.
to just,
Yeah.
hey, how's it going? Check in. What did you do yesterday? What are you doing today? What roadblocks? And then the every 2-week call is more of an in-depth review of process, things like that.
Right. And the daily huddle, I keep notes, copious notes about what the challenges are, who needs to do what, and so on and so forth. And so everybody can see publicly where they stand. And this is one of the biggest challenges that I have with the way most performance is managed, is that we have at best a quarterly review, but most often it's like this annual review. And it's people have no idea where they stand. They don't know how they're performing. And then you drop an annual review on them. And at best, it's the best we can remember from the past 2-3 months. But with this process, you build engagement. Everybody knows where they stand at any given time. And so there's no surprises when you come to them and throw a performance improvement plan or need to recalibrate their work or whatever it is. It's all out in the open. Everybody knows.
What tools do you use to do that?
So I was just using, right now I use Trello, but when I had a bigger team, I was just using a shared document, a shared Microsoft Word document.
That's fascinating. I had another guy on the podcast, DJ Hume, and he's built a syndication practice, multifamily predominantly, but most of his team is all virtual, and it's amazing.
Yeah. I wouldn't say that you don't need domestic talent, because there are some things that just don't work overseas. But I would say that it's a lot more challenging to find the right people domestically than it is overseas, because a lot of people locally, if they're superstars, they're happy and compensated well, staying where they are. And the people who are in the market are not necessarily cream of the crop. Whereas overseas, whether it's in South America or Southeast Asia, you're providing just tremendous opportunity, and you can win people over with lifestyle benefits and all these other things.
Have you found that there are challenges or advantages from different regions or countries when it comes to maybe different skill sets or different, I was talking about this the other day, Argentina versus India or Pakistan? There are cultural differences wherein the North America or the Americas, they tend to grow up on the same TV shows, even if it's in a different language, even if it's in Spanish. Whereas in India, you still have like almost remnants of the caste system where they would almost rather prefer to say yes and either not do it right or just delay instead of front loading the conversation of, hey, I can't do that.
Yeah. And I think that's a big challenge when you're hiring people, especially in Southeast Asia. It's a very respectful culture. They put authority or a position on a pedestal. And so it takes a good amount of work to open up the conversation. So you don't get a bunch of yes people, and you get people who challenge the general orthodoxy. I think that's something that's very common in Southeast Asia, and especially because a lot of the people that you're recruiting are women who a lot of them are single moms, or they're bolting on additional income overnight for the family. The challenge that I ran into is that there's just such enormous income disparity there. So at the executive level, because there's such a huge LATAM business here in the States, you end up paying just about the same as you would somebody domestically. But then at the frontline level, you're competitive with the Philippines or India or Pakistan.
It's interesting to just contemplate. So I guess if you're thinking about CFO type level at the executive level, or
Yeah, yes and no. I mean,
controller.
I'm thinking more of like an HR leader or something like
I see.
that. So if you have an HR leader paying them here in the US, maybe like 70, 80,000 in Colombia, whereas the call center person in Colombia is $1,000 a month, which is very similar to what you're paying in the Philippines.
And then I guess that is just depending on what time zone preference you have, or language skills, perhaps. Is there any questions you have for me, or anything else you want to add?
Yeah, no, this was super fun.
Who would you say your ICP is for your practice?
So on the management consulting side, it's somebody who's hit a ceiling. They know they have more in them and they know that they want to scale and build a business where they can break free and really stay in their zone of genius, focus on investing rather than putting out fires in operations. That's really the folks that I'm looking to help on the management consulting side. On the asset management and investing side, I primarily work with experienced investors. These are family offices, institutions, that sort of thing. They know why they want to be in the hotel world and they understand the risks and the rewards of being there. And so I just come in and support them through their growth and watch their blind spots in the market.
If somebody out there fits the profile, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
So I'm on LinkedIn, John Wijtenburg, spelled Wijtenburg. That's where I spend a lot of my time. My contact information, phone number, email is all there.
Great. Awesome. John, thank you so much, man. I've really appreciated it, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Likewise. Thanks so much for having me, Stash.
All right. Thank you. All right. We'll wrap there.
Okay.
That was, like I said, super interesting because it's like adjacent to a lot of things I talk about or am involved with, but it's just the hotel world it's a mystery to me. Not a mystery, but something I've never really spent any time in. So
Yeah, it's a little different. A lot of people don't realize how much velocity there is in this business.
I just put a post out on my Substack about a guy named Mike Ely. Did I talk to you about Mike last time?
Yeah, you mentioned
Yeah.
I'm always open to meeting new people.
I'll do that as afterwards, and I think this will go out in about a month, maybe a little later. But what I'll do is I'll take the transcript, plug it in ChatGPT, say, give me the learnings from this, and I'll push that out pretty quickly.
Okay. That's
All right,
awesome.
great, man. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
All right.
That's it for the Stashcast. Subscribe, share, and stay ahead in commercial real estate and prop tech. See you next time.